The most hated athletes in sports explained: LeBron James. LeBron James is one of the greatest basketball players of all time, but with greatness comes hate. When he entered the NBA as a teenager, many crowned him the chosen one before he even played a single game. For some, that kind of hype was already too much. But the real turning point came in 2010, when LeBron announced he was leaving Cleveland to join the Miami Heat in a primetime TV special called The Decision. Instead of being celebrated, he was blasted for arrogance. Fans in Cleveland burned his jerseys, and critics labeled him a sellout who couldn't win without a super team. The hate only grew when the Heat began dominating, with LeBron embracing a villain role alongside Dwyane Wade and Chris Bosh. Every championship was met with as much criticism as praise, with constant debates over whether he'd ever match Michael Jordan. Even after returning to Cleveland and delivering the city its first title in 50 years, the hate didn't die. For every fan who respects his longevity and dominance, there's another who calls him a flopper, a whiner, or someone who ruined the NBA with super team culture. LeBron is adored and despised in equal measure, proof that being too good can make you just as hated as being bad. Imagine ending a 50-year drought for a city and still being treated like you ghosted them on prom night. That's LeBron's relationship with Cleveland. Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the ultimate NFL winner: 7 Super Bowls, endless playoff runs, and a career that lasted 2 decades. But that success is also what made him so hated. For years, NFL fans who weren't Patriots fans grew sick of seeing Brady in every AFC championship. They called him boring, robotic, and the beneficiary of referees and lucky breaks. And then came the scandals. First, Spygate, where the Patriots were caught illegally videotaping opposing teams' signals. Then Deflategate, when Brady was accused of using underinflated footballs in a playoff game. Even though the evidence was shaky, Brady was suspended, and the label of cheater stuck to him permanently. On top of that, his squeaky clean image rubbed people the wrong way. Married to a supermodel, living the perfect lifestyle, and constantly winning, Brady became the villain simply for being too perfect. But there's also respect. Even haters can't deny his longevity, clutch performances, and unmatched resume. For millions, though, Tom Brady is the NFL's golden boy, who overstayed his welcome at the top, turning admiration into pure resentment. And with 7 rings, Brady doesn't really need a jewelry box anymore. He needs a trophy case, just for his hands. Floyd Mayweather. Few athletes embrace being hated the way Floyd Money Mayweather does. In the ring, he's one of the best boxers in history. 50 wins, no losses, and a defensive style that frustrated opponents. But outside the ring, Mayweather built a brand on arrogance, flaunting $100 bills, private jets, and a lifestyle most fans could only dream of. To critics, he's the definition of excess, bragging about money, cherry-picking opponents, and charging fans for overpriced pay-per-views that often delivered more hype than action. His cautious fighting style led many to call him boring, ducking true battles in favor of protecting his undefeated record. And then there's his criminal record. Mayweather has faced multiple domestic violence allegations, which cast a dark shadow over his career. For some, that makes him more than just cocky. It makes him despicable. Still, Mayweather leans into the hate, branding himself as the villain people pay to watch lose. The problem for his critics, he never lost. For every fan who calls him a coward, there's another who respects his genius at turning boos into billion-dollar paydays. Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds is baseball's home run king, but to many fans he's also the face of everything wrong with the sport. Early in his career, Bonds was already an elite player, winning MVPs with a mix of speed and power. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, his body transformed, and so did his numbers. Suddenly, he was hitting home runs at a pace no one had ever seen. The problem? Steroids. Bonds became the central figure of baseball's steroid era, accused of using performance-enhancing drugs to shatter records. When he broke Hank Aaron's all-time home run record, instead of celebration, he was met with boos, asterisks, and endless debates about whether his stats should even count. Fans saw him as arrogant, dismissive of the media, and unapologetic about the scandal that tarnished the game. Even today, he remains out of the Hall of Fame, his career overshadowed by questions of cheating. To his defenders, Bonds was hated simply because he was better than everyone else, with or without steroids. But to his critics, he's the man who hit his way into history books with a needle, not a bat. Cristiano Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo is one of soccer's greatest players, with goals, trophies, and a global fan base that worships him. But he's also one of the most polarizing figures in sports. For every fan who calls him the GOAT, there's another who despises him for his arrogance. From his trademark celebrations to his shirtless flexes, Ronaldo has built an image of supreme confidence that often crosses into cockiness. Rival fans accuse him of diving, complaining to referees, and putting himself above the team. Off the field, his flashy lifestyle, sports cars, mansions, endless branding, makes him seem unrelatable, more like a celebrity than an athlete. He's also faced controversies, including a tax evasion case in Spain that cost him millions, and serious off-field allegations that damaged his reputation further. Despite all this, Ronaldo remains adored by millions, especially Real Madrid, Manchester United, and Portugal fans. But in stadiums across Europe, he's been booed relentlessly. Love him or hate him, Ronaldo is proof that greatness and arrogance often walk hand in hand. Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong was once an American hero, 7-time Tour de France winner, cancer survivor, and global icon. But his fall from grace is one of the most dramatic in sports history. For years, Armstrong denied using performance-enhancing drugs, attacking journalists and whistleblowers who suggested otherwise. He positioned himself as a clean athlete dominating a dirty sport. Fans wore yellow Livestrong bracelets, inspired by his comeback story. Then the truth came out. Armstrong had been the ringleader of one of the most sophisticated doping programs ever seen in cycling. Stripped of his titles and banned for life, his entire legacy evaporated overnight. The same fans who once idolized him now saw him as a fraud who built a fortune on lies. Even worse, Armstrong's arrogance during the cover-up, bullying critics, suing rivals, and lying to the public made him one of the most despised athletes ever. To this day, his name is shorthand for betrayal in sports. Serena Williams. Serena Williams is the most dominant women's tennis player of her generation, but her career has been just as polarizing as it has been historic. On the court, her power, longevity, and Grand Slam titles earned her a place among the all-time greats. But with dominance came backlash. Critics accused Serena of poor sportsmanship, pointing to infamous outbursts at umpires during matches, including her heated arguments at the 2009 U.S. Open and the 2018 final against Naomi Osaka. Those moments fueled a narrative that she was entitled, disrespectful, and unable to accept losing. She's also faced an unusual level of scrutiny for her appearance, personality, and playing style, with detractors painting her as too aggressive or unfeminine. Much of the hate Serena receives is rooted in sexism and racism, which makes her one of the most unfairly criticized athletes of all time. To her defenders, she's a trailblazer who broke barriers and never apologized for her greatness. To her critics, she's a champion with a temper. Either way, few athletes inspire such divided opinions. Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod. Alex Rodriguez should have been a beloved baseball star, an MVP, World Series champion, and one of the most talented players ever. Instead, he became one of the sport's most hated figures. A-Rod's reputation took a nosedive when he admitted to using steroids, after years of denial. Fans felt betrayed, seeing him as part of the era that poisoned baseball. But it wasn't just the drugs, it was his personality. Rodriguez was often viewed as fake, calculating, and obsessed with his image. His massive contract with the Yankees made him the highest-paid player in the league, but also a target for fans and media. Teammates questioned his leadership, and critics said he cared more about attention than winning. Even after retiring and reinventing himself as a TV analyst, A-Rod still can't escape the hate. For many, he'll always be the poster child for wasted potential and phony charm in sports. John McEnroe. John McEnroe is remembered as much for his temper as for his tennis. During the 1980s, he was one of the best players in the world, but his constant meltdowns became legendary. His famous line, "You cannot be serious," was shouted at umpires so often it became his trademark. Fans accused him of being disrespectful, arrogant, and unsportsmanlike, constantly berating officials and throwing tantrums on the court. In an era that prized gentlemanly behavior in tennis, McEnroe stood out as the ultimate bad boy. But while many hated him, others loved him for the same reasons. His fiery personality brought energy to a sport often criticized as too quiet and polite. He blurred the line between villain and entertainer, turning boos into box office. Today, McEnroe has softened his image as a commentator, but his legacy remains, the tennis genius, who was just as famous for his rants as his rallies. Honestly, his tennis racket probably spent more time airborne than his serve ever did. Terrell Owens, or T.O., was one of the NFL's most talented wide receivers, and one of its most controversial. On the field, his skill was undeniable, with highlight reel touchdowns and game-changing plays, but it was what he did after those plays that made him hated. Owens became infamous for his touchdown celebrations, dancing on the Cowboys' star logo, pulling Sharpies out of his sock, or mocking opponents. To fans and opponents, it was showboating. To T.O., it was entertainment. But his antics weren't limited to the field. Owens clashed with teammates, publicly criticized quarterbacks like Donovan McNabb, and created locker room chaos wherever he went. Despite his production, teams often grew tired of the drama. His defenders say he was just misunderstood, punished for showing personality in a league that preferred quiet stars. His critics say he was selfish, toxic, and cared more about himself than winning. Either way, Owens left the NFL as one of the most talented and most hated players in football history. And of course, nothing screams team player like doing shirtless sit-ups in your driveway during a live interview. Classic T.O. Draymond Green. Draymond Green is the heart of the Golden State Warriors dynasty, but he might also be the most hated player in modern basketball. Known for his defense, energy, and trash talk, Green turned himself into an all-star despite being undersized and overlooked, but his aggressive style has earned him plenty of enemies. Green has a reputation for dirty play, kicking opponents, hitting below the belt, and racking up technical fouls. His constant complaining to referees and trash talk to rivals make him a villain on the court. The infamous 2016 NBA Finals, when Green was suspended for hitting LeBron James, cemented his place as one of the league's most polarizing figures. Even Warriors fans admit he can be frustrating, while opposing fans love to boo him. Still, his defenders argue he's the glue that holds the Warriors together, a competitor who will do anything to win. But for many, Draymond Green isn't just a player. He's the NBA's ultimate agitator. But let's be real. If technical fouls were frequent flyer miles, Draymond could have booked a trip to the moon by now. Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic is one of the greatest tennis players ever, but he's also one of the most disliked. While Federer and Nadal were adored worldwide, Djokovic often found himself cast as the villain. Some of it comes from his on-court behavior, mocking opponents, arguing with umpires, and showing frustration when things don't go his way. Off the court, he's been criticized for controversial comments, questionable medical claims, and, most infamously, his refusal to get vaccinated, which led to his deportation from Australia in 2022. Fans accuse him of lacking the grace and humility of Federer and Nadal, painting him as arrogant and opportunistic. Even when winning, Djokovic often feels like the outsider in his own era. Yet his supporters see him as unfairly judged, a player who broke through a sport dominated by two beloved legends and never got the love he deserved. But love or hate, Djokovic has forced his way into history, whether fans like it or not. Either way, Djokovic could win a Grand Slam and still get less applause than Federer opening a water bottle. Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick went from Super Bowl quarterback to one of the most divisive figures in American sports. On the field, he electrified fans with his running and passing, leading the 49ers to the brink of a championship. But it wasn't his play that made him hated. It was his protest. In 2016, Kaepernick began kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality, and racial injustice. Supporters praised his courage, but critics accused him of disrespecting the flag, the military, and the country itself. Overnight, he went from NFL star to political lightning rod. The backlash was fierce. Fans burned his jerseys, owners blackballed him from the league, and political figures called him unpatriotic. He hasn't played in the NFL since 2016, sparking debates over whether he was punished for his stance. For his defenders, Kaepernick is a hero who sacrificed his career for a cause bigger than football. For his critics, he's the man who brought politics into sports and divided fans forever. Hope Solo. Hope Solo was one of the best goalkeepers in women's soccer history, helping the U.S. win 2 Olympic gold medals and a World Cup. But her career was filled with controversy that made her one of the most disliked figures in her sport. Solo was outspoken, often criticizing teammates, coaches, and even other national teams. She called the Swedish women's team a bunch of cowards after a loss, drawing backlash worldwide. Her brash personality clashed with the image of team unity, making her a polarizing figure even among fans of U.S. soccer. Off the field, Solo faced multiple suspensions, including for misconduct during tournaments and an arrest on domestic violence charges. Though some of those charges were eventually dropped, the damage to her reputation was permanent. To supporters, Solo was punished for speaking her mind in a sport that preferred polite stars. To her critics, she was a toxic presence who overshadowed her own greatness with reckless behavior. Manny Ramirez. Manny Ramirez was one of baseball's most entertaining hitters, but he was also one of its most polarizing. Known for his quirky antics, forgetting how many outs there were, disappearing into the green monster during games, or showing up late, he earned the nickname Manny being Manny. At first, fans found it funny, but over time, his behavior became infuriating, especially for teammates and managers who questioned his commitment. Then came the steroid suspensions, which erased much of the goodwill he had built up as a beloved slugger. Ramirez's talent was undeniable. He was a World Series MVP and one of the most clutch hitters of his era. But his reputation as a diva, combined with cheating scandals, left him hated in many baseball circles. For defenders, Manny was just a free spirit who kept the game entertaining. For critics, he was selfish, lazy, and ultimately dishonest. Diego Maradona. Diego Maradona is a soccer god in Argentina and Naples, Italy, but everywhere else he was one of the most controversial players in history. His Hand of God goal against England in the 1986 World Cup became one of the most infamous moments in soccer. To his fans, it was cunning. To everyone else, it was blatant cheating on the world's biggest stage. Off the field, Maradona lived a life of chaos. Drug addictions, weight problems, and scandals with women and money. He fought with managers, cursed at reporters, and carried himself as if rules didn't apply to him. Yet, on the pitch, he was mesmerizing, leading Argentina to World Cup glory and Napoli to improbable titles. That contradiction, genius on the field, disaster off it, made him both worshipped and despised. Even in death, Maradona remains divisive. A legend to some, a disgrace to others. Pete Rose. Pete Rose is baseball's all-time hits leader, but instead of being remembered as a legend, he's remembered as a cheat. Nicknamed Charlie Hustle, Rose played with a ferocious energy that made him a fan favorite, but his career came crashing down when it was revealed he had bet on games while managing the Cincinnati Reds. Rose was banned from baseball for life in 1989, and to this day he's barred from the Hall of Fame. Fans saw him as a liar after he denied gambling for years, only to later admit it. Some argue he was unfairly punished. After all, he never bet against his own team. But others say he violated the most sacred rule of baseball, the integrity of the game. Pete Rose remains a symbol of wasted greatness, a man adored for his play but hated for his betrayal. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is one of the most famous fighters in the world, but he's also one of the most hated. The Irish UFC star rose to fame with his knockout power and outrageous trash talk. Fans loved his confidence at first, but over time, it became arrogance. McGregor's antics outside the octagon only fueled the hate, throwing a dolly through a bus window, multiple arrests, and endless feuds with fighters, promoters, and even fans. His trash talk often crossed the line into personal insults, earning him enemies across the sport. And then came the losses. After years of hype, McGregor's record began to slip, and critics accused him of being more interested in whiskey sales and celebrity status than fighting. For his defenders, McGregor is an entertainer who brought MMA into the mainstream. For his haters, he's an overrated loudmouth who fell in love with fame and forgot how to win. At this point, McGregor has thrown more bar stools than punches. Outro and call to action. From LeBron to McGregor, these athletes show that hate comes in many forms. Some were despised for arrogance, some for cheating, and others simply for winning too much. But one thing is clear: being hated often means you mattered. In sports, villains drive storylines just as much as heroes. So, who do you think is the most hated athlete of all?